All right. Hello, TMJ4 and Green Bay Packer fans, and welcome to the pregame show. Pretty because we will have a pregame show for the last preseason game of the Green Bay Packers season against the Kansas City Chiefs. We are at 6:00 on TMJ4. We are joined by Lance Allan, who is in KC. Lance, first of all, you were a little late to our meeting, so I gotta say, were you at the barbecue joint? Were you having some barbecue?
Yeah, barbecue seems to be the thing down here, Delaney, and without getting too deep into the weeds, everybody has their favorite. I will just list off all of the ones I've heard or I've experienced or I've seen over the years. You have Jack Stack, you have Oklahoma Joe's, you have Q39, you have Arthur Bryant's, and I'm sure you have a myriad of others. So I don't want this to completely go off the rails and have somebody say you didn't list my favorite, or or get in a huge argument of one being better than the other. I just know that there's a lot of barbecue down here.
I think Q39 is what we had last time we were down there a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic.
Yes, that was the one, and we went to Jack Stack actually last night. So that there aren't really any bad choices. It's just what do you like the best, basically. And then you'll laugh at this, Delaney, and then we can get into Packer talk. Is a good friend of mine that I started in the business with and went to Wisconsin with, Joe Goldberg. So I've known him for 30 years. He works for the Royals. He does their pregame, their postgame, and some in-game reports. And I showed up last night at the beginning of the seventh inning when they were down 1-0. They had a safety squeeze on as I walked into the stadium, and it worked. So they scored their first run of the game against the Diamondbacks literally as I walked in behind home plate. And they proceeded to score 5 runs in the seventh inning and win 5-3. So he now proclaims that I need to come to every Royals game since they're 24 games under 500, and I'm the good luck charm. But I think it was mere coincidence. Let's put it that way. But Kauffman Stadium, if you ever get the chance, older stadium, really, really cool stadium.
No, absolutely, and I agree with that. I've been to Kauffman, and it's an awesome place. So let's talk a little bit of Packers, because I don't want to talk baseball right now, even though I am a baseball. It's rough.
Frank Cosentino wants to see the gun show, so that's about as big of a gun show as he's going to get right there. So there, I do take viewer requests, but go ahead, Delaney.
No, just say I don't want to talk baseball right now because it's a little depressing, both for Royal fans and Brewer fans right now. And even if you're watching the Little League World Series, it can be depressing. Poor Rick here in the sports department has been having to listen to me yell at the TV while we watch the Little League World Series from time to time. But let's get into Packers, because this is pretty much it for those bubble guys. I mean, yes, we know who the starters are. Yes, we kind of have a good idea of second string, who will come in here and there. But guys on the bubble, I'm interested still in the wide receivers, because I'm trying to figure out, do they keep 7? Do they keep 8? And it also mirrors into the punt and kick returners as well. So if there's 3 guys, Samori Toure, Juwan Winfrey, and Amari Rodgers, in your mind, who has to come and show out tonight in order to make that roster?
And I would even argue, Delaney, that maybe they only keep 6, because there's the chance of that as well, as far as on the active roster. And then, they would hope to keep 1 or 2 or a couple of guys on the practice squad. Toure is one of those guys that he showed out on family night, and then he's been relatively quiet in the other preseason games. So I'm gonna lean toward him if that's what the question is, because Winfrey does have the experience. Hasn't done anything to completely wow you, but at least he has experience and has been solid in the preseason. Dobbs has had his ups and downs, but he's definitely a lock. And even though Watson has been injured and is a true game time decision tonight, and looking for his first action, he's a lock as well as a second rounder. So you're not going to get rid of those guys. And right now, your top 3, in my opinion, and I think anybody's opinion practically, would be obviously Watson, Watkins, as well as Cobb, as well as Lazard, not necessarily in that order, but I think those 3 guys are going to get, the bulk of the snaps, and then you kind of mix in Dobbs, and then Watson will be there. So then are they fighting for 1 spot? Are they fighting for 2? A very good question. Amari Rodgers has been an interesting case study as well, where tonight could be a very big night or a make or break night to a degree for him as well, because we saw the kickoff return, and that is his game, where he can tilt the field in your favor. We saw the touchdown in the first game against the 49ers and some of the nice things that he's done. But he's also, he kind of got more of the blame for one of Jordan Love's 3 interceptions in the first game for not quite running his route correctly. So yeah, the good and the bad, so to speak. And you're right. I think there are some, probably a debate as to is there 5, 6, 7, maybe up to 8 spots truly up for grabs tonight. But I do think there are some spots at the back end of the roster that are up for grabs.
Well, Jeff just joined us, and he asked the question that we were kind of just talking about there. Does Amari Rodgers make the final roster? I'm kind of with you, Lance. I think he has done the work physically, and I think he came back in year 2 to show that he's serious about, being a contender and being a guy that helps this offense. I don't think there's any question in his determination and his dedication to the team and to the Packers. However, there's been some drop balls, missed opportunities. And I think tonight, when he is in the punt return and the kick return, I think he needs to have, I hate to say it because it sounds like it's asking a lot, but I think he needs to have another 50-yard run. I think he needs to have another 50-yard return in order to show that, no, I'm your guy, because they have just been switching in and out. It's been a rotating door. You've got Rico Gafford, you've got Ishmael Hyman, who have been in there as well. So I think Amari Rodgers, I think he's this close. I just think they want a little more consistency from him. We mentioned the first preseason game, blamed for one of those 3 interceptions. And then game 2, everybody kind of got a little bit better, but I think he's somebody that needs to show that consistency in game time, because let's be honest, that's where they were always worried about him. Watching him in practice, he's been phenomenal, but then his rookie season put him out there on the field and it's hit or miss. So I think they just need to see consistency from him in order to make the roster. But going into, like I mentioned, the kick and the punt return, Rico Gafford, Ishmael Hyman, they've been kind of rotated in there. To me, those are bubble guys as well. Do you keep one of those just, as an extra, a placeholder almost?
Yeah, Hyman had the really nice return, kind of seemingly came out of nowhere because nobody was really talking about him. So I guess Delaney, I would lean more toward Rico Gafford. Tantalizing speed, 4.22, 40 speed. And he's a guy who's kind of bounced around. Does he have a true position? Maybe not. I mean, he went from being on defense to switching to wide receiver with the Raiders to going back now to cornerback. But he does have that breakaway speed and that ability to affect the game in a different manner. So I don't know if the Packers want to totally give up on that. And then the other question, you mentioned it with Amari Rodgers, is once again those tantalizing plays that every once in a while you see, and definitely, losing 10 to 15 pounds and looking the part in practice, but then sometimes in games it kind of comes and goes. So those are 2 guys tonight that I would definitely be watching to see if they can solidify their spot, so to speak.
And while we speak about bubble guys, is it safe to say that if you are in the O-line room right now, you're going to make the roster because the Packers made those moves to kind of get, it seems, to weed out who they don't and do want. And unfortunately, that included trading Cole Van Lannon to the Jaguars.
Yeah, it kind of seems that way because, the starting offensive line for the preseason has basically been the guys that they would go with if Bakhtiari and Jenkins can't suit up week 1. So you're looking at Nyman, you're looking at Newman on the ends, you're looking at Jake Hansen, you're looking at Runyon, and you're looking at Myers on the inside. And so I don't think, to your point, Delaney, I don't think you can get rid of anybody not knowing fully what the status of Jenkins and Bakhtiari will be week 1 against the Vikings on September 11th. And you need some depth there and things like that. So I would tend to agree with you that, the Packers have always gone out of their way, and I believe them on this. Sometimes it's team speak, sometimes it's PR spin, sometimes it's whatever. But they want to make sure that the 53-man roster is every single player has earned their way onto the roster. And sometimes it's been, an extra, guy at a certain position, or maybe what most fans would consider too many offensive linemen or too many defensive linemen or too many cornerbacks or whatever. But they want to make it so that they know in the locker room that if you have earned a spot, you have earned a spot. And they don't want to plant even that seed of doubt that, oh yeah, just because a guy was a high draft pick, or just because we only have, 4 good cornerbacks, we have to keep a fifth, and this guy isn't really all that good, but oh boy, we gotta keep him because we just gotta have a body. No, they've proven over the years, for the most part, time and time again, that they issue roster decisions by merit, not by just, hey, you're a guy who plays that position and we need you over somebody else that more earned their spot on the roster. So that's one factor. And then the other thing is, I don't think that Brian Gutekunst on down, that the staff, the personnel staff, is done by any means. Like, they have obviously until Tuesday to get down to that 53-man roster and then the 16-man practice squad. So essentially you have a 69-man roster. But there will be cuts that I'm sure. We saw Travis Fulgham come in, at wide receiver, and they've been, fairly happy with him during camp to kind of stir things up when the receiver position was kind of getting criticized. So what's to say that somebody doesn't get released somewhere else, or they make a last second trade? And we've seen it before where the final 53-man roster isn't necessarily the final 53-man roster when the Packers put it out, or a guy may think he made the team and then cruelly or unfortunately not be on the team because of something else happening.
So kind of going off that, two things I want to take away from that, but I'll start with this. Patrick Taylor and Goodson. I mean, if I had to take one right now, it'd be Goodson.
Yeah.
So, of course, and then you've got A.J. Dillon and you've got Aaron Jones. Is that kind of a guy where you're talking about, hey, we're going to make sure he earned his spot? Because in my opinion, he has earned his spot.
Yeah, nothing against Patrick Taylor, but Tyler Goodson is the one that has started, obviously in the preseason, and has done a good job. Hasn't done anything, once again, crazy spectacular, but he has definitely gotten chunk yards and has moved the chains and has done the job. So I'm with you, Delaney, that if you're going to keep a third running back, and you probably are, it's probably going to be him. And then I know that the second go around of Dexter Williams, the Packers are pleasantly surprised. Like, he has changed his game, and it seems like he's more sure of himself and a better running back. So don't necessarily count out Dexter Williams, even if it's for a practice squad role. Don't necessarily count him out. But I think as of right now, if you look at it going into this game, I think Tyler Goodson has earned his spot as the third running back, as you mentioned, behind Jones and Dillon, as you kind of have Matt LaFleur calling them 1A and 1A. I think those guys, it depends on the game who gets more touches, more carries, more whatever. Might be some games where Aaron Jones sees a little more, and there might be games where A.J. Dillon sees a little more. And I think that's a good problem to have.
I like that you mentioned Dexter Williams. I definitely hope he at least gets, I don't see him making the final, but I see him making the practice squad. It's hard not to root for a guy like that, because we saw him come and go, and then he had his stint in the USFL, and I think he really learned from that opportunity. And I think he grew, and now the Packers realize, okay, well, he left us for a year and he comes back and he still knows everything. He's retained that information, and that's a huge get if something were to happen to your top three guys. So I'm glad you mentioned Dexter. We're not supposed to root for anybody, but it's hard not to root for a guy like that, because he just was so happy when he got the opportunity to come back and be in that locker room, and he didn't care one bit that he was in the Nook locker room per se, instead of being in the big locker room with everybody else.
Or the Green Mile, as they call it, Delaney. But an old movie reference, but still, I love that reference, that it's the Green Mile where everybody in the secondary locker room wants to get into the main locker room. Yeah.
So he was happy to be back. Let's talk about some bubble on the defense. I think for the most part, this whole training camp, really, going back to OTAs, we haven't really talked about the defense, because the defense has been gladly set and we've been happy with it. And everybody's kind of said, okay, this is it. But a guy last week against the Saints, Micah Abernathy, came out of nowhere. I got to admit, at first I saw the jersey and I was like, wait a second, who is this guy? Is that someone who you think, if he gets another interception tonight, if he has a good showing, that he could make that defense?
I think we already saw the jump, Delaney, because Vernon Scott was injured. Abernathy came in, made the pick. Well, guess what happened this week? Vernon Scott got waived, and Abernathy, here we go again, that he might start tonight or might get a decent amount of playing time once again tonight. And I think they want to continue to look at what they have here. So, no, I think the ramifications of it have already kind of washed out. So I like looking at situations like that. I think the outside linebacker spot is once again under the microscope. I mean, everybody knows that it's going to be Rashawn Gary, who most people pick as the, most likely to emerge as a star type player on this defense, if not the entire team, and Preston Smith. That's why you pay those guys that money, and you have the expectations of them starting. But the Jonathan Garvers and the Tipa Nalia, I think is injured, so we won't get to see as much of him. But there are some spots there to be had at outside linebacker as well. And then defensive line. Think about it this way: is yes, we've seen Devontae Wyatt, the first rounder, but for the most part, we have not seen the first team defensive line. We haven't seen Kenny Clark. We haven't seen Dean Lowry. We haven't seen Jared Reed. And for the most part, like Chris Slayton is one of those guys that's really done a nice job of, he's the type of guy that you don't outwork him. And it has a great example for the locker room of not a well-known or a big name guy, but he just continues to hustle out there and have the drive and make plays. So Chris Slayton is a guy like that. Heflin is a guy, once again, that, he thought that he might have made the team last year, and then and he did. And then all of a sudden, they had to do roster shuffling and things like that. Another guy who's ultra motivated to show what he can do. And TJ as well. So they've basically gone with their second defensive line, their second team defense, and against the Saints in those scrimmages on Tuesday and Wednesday, for the most part, and especially on Wednesday, the second team Packers defensive line got after the second team Saints line, and dare I say, got after the first team offensive line in practice. I should have said offensive line, but the second team defensive line, that was a thin position for the Packers last year. I mean, it seemed like Kenny Clark was doing a lot. Dean Lowry had potentially a career year, but you really didn't have a lot behind them, and they got rid of Kingsley Keke. Even though the position was a little bit on the thin side, but obviously they just felt like they had to go a different direction. So this year they've got depth, and this year they've got talent. So that's something that I've kind of noticed that, and you've noticed it at training camp too, Delaney, that for the most part, the defense has gotten the best of the offense. So, now the question is, okay, is the defense, and especially the defensive line, that good, or is there reason to be concerned about the Packers offensive line and the Packers offense, because it doesn't seem like they can get a lot or as much going as what they would like against the Packers defense? As of right now, the one thing we know is I think the Packers defense is going to be really good. The question mark is, how good is the Packers offense? Because we haven't seen the first team offense very much other than practice.
And unfortunately for fans, we won't, because not only does Aaron Rodgers not play in the preseason, but Matt LaFleur has said none of our starters who haven't been playing, with the exception of that O-line, because they needed to get those reps, because there was concern that you don't have Elton and you don't have David come off the PUP in time. But now that those guys are back, it's looking up for the Packers offense, I think. I'm going to hope that the Packers defense is just that good and is just that stacked. And I'm going to hope that the O-line is just average, which, let's think about it, is kind of just the way around the league. You can have an average O-line, and if you've got a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, stuff is going to happen. So if the O-line is average, I'm fine with that. But I'm really excited that the defense could possibly be as good as we're seeing in training camp, and how it's being up and talked about. And you mentioned Rashawn Gary. That's another guy too. You see him get after the quarterback in practice, and you're like, gosh, I hope that translates over to the regular season when the quarters start to count. One last thing that I think is important, just to circle back on, you mentioned Christian Watson will be a true game time decision. He said in the locker room that he understands whether he does or doesn't get reps in the preseason. That's not going to be an excuse when it comes to week one. He's going to have to catch up. He's going to have to earn his spot. Do you think that there is enough time, if Christian Watson doesn't play in this game, do you think there's enough time between now and September 11th for him to actually come out and show what we have been told is so amazing and so awesome about him?
Funny you asked that, because that is a perfect tease and a perfect promotion for our 6 o'clock show, Delaney, today, that we will delve into that, because that is precisely what I asked Christian Watson in the locker room, not knowing if he's actually going to play tonight. And I do believe he is a true game time decision, and see where he's at. He practiced a little bit this week. But that is the question I asked was, when you have opportunity before you, and especially when you're a rookie, you can take all the mental reps you want, and that definitely helps. And I think he is very attentive in practice and noticing, certain things, but it doesn't replace, game reps, game speed, and then getting out there practice. Had some reps this week, but obviously he's behind. And Romeo Doubs has taken advantage of the opportunity, not through Christian Watson's fault, but he's just taken advantage of the opportunity. So I think that is a legitimate question to ask. And the other thing to add to that is I would lean toward, when you have a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, my assumption would be no, that he probably won't contribute a lot against the Minnesota Vikings and early in the season because regardless of how studious you are in the playbook and regardless of how many mental reps you've had, you're still at least a little bit behind. I don't think he's like so far behind that he can never catch up, but I do think that you're behind. So, and Aaron Rodgers has to build that trust with his receivers. And I think that especially with rookies, you're going to have a lot of ups and downs. And that's why they want to speed up the process on Dobbs, is because you want to have fewer downs than ups, but there will be some growing pains, and he's going to be forced to play sooner rather than later. I think Watson, it's going to be more of a wait and see attitude.
I think it'll be interesting to see how he does when he does get out there, only because in the past we have been so big on you have to be on the same mental page with Aaron Rodgers. Very few people can be on the same mental page as him. Davante Adams was probably one of the few who actually knew what Rodgers was going to do, maybe before Rodgers knew what he was going to do. I'm interested to see, because like you mentioned, he's been talking, they've been having conversations, he's been asking questions. Rodgers has even, praised him on that, trying to do as much as he possibly can. So I'm curious if the physicality truly is there, and it's like riding a bike for him when he gets back on that field. I'm wondering if we'll be pleasantly surprised with how in sync they are because of that mental preparation. I think this is one of the only situations where we could maybe have that hope, because it's Aaron Rodgers and because the mental game and kind of guessing and being on that same wavelength is so big with him. And not a lot of guys, I think, coming in think about that part, especially when you're a rookie. You're just like, I just want to show I can catch the ball, I can run, I can make plays, I can jump in the air, catch it one hand, bring it down. So I'm hoping, and I'm being optimistic that when it's his time, we'll be pleasantly surprised with how connected they are. Now, we could also be I don't know, what's the opposite of pleasantly surprised? Just
disappointed.
Pleasantly, I told you so, that it's going to take him a while. So, but we'll just all see. We'll see how it all goes. But Lance, I want to let you go, because not only have our 6:00 pregame show, but you've also got your duties with the Packer Network, and you've got a lot of preparation to do, aka a lot more barbecue places to fit in.
Well, I was going to add one quick thing, and I'll make it super quick because I know we're wrapping up. Is like I feel like this year the tight ends will be more involved because that's the true Matt LaFleur system. So the other question is, Robert Tonyan, will he be ready for week 1? And we've seen Josiah DeGuara and the promise that he's had his first couple of years. I think the injury kind of set him back in his rookie year when he was starting to get more snaps and starting to play more. But Josiah DeGuara, has taken advantage of his opportunity this preseason. Tyler Davis is one of those guys, like you mentioned, Delaney, that he's had some mistakes. So he's got he's had a fumble, and one of the interceptions was on him as well. So he's got to take advantage of his opportunities. Mercedes Lewis is a veteran. They know what they've got in him. Yeah. No questions there. But I do think that the tight end is something that we probably haven't talked about enough or a lot. That is a position that's going to be utilized more going forward.
Well, that's because I just didn't want to think about it, because there's so much that goes into that position, especially with our offense with the blocking. I mean, I remember we were having conversations at the beginning of training camp, like, okay, if this person can't get back, if this person can't get back, well, then Jones is going to have to block, and so the running game is going to be all messed up, and the tight ends, should the tight ends block it set? So that I just didn't want to think about that right now, but thank you for bringing it up. So right as we end this, so now we can all worry about it until kickoff at 7:00.
There you go. There you go. But yeah, we definitely have some good content. 5 o'clock. We'll talk to some of the younger guys. Danny Etling, who had that incredible run, and you remember Delaney. Aaron Rodgers was on our air on the Packers TV network, and was praising him on and just talked about his speed. So we're gonna, Danny Etling, kind of a long shot guy, but a guy who made the most of his opportunity, and we'll also hear from Isaiah McDuffie, the linebacker, who in year 2 he just looks the part. Like, he had 6 tackles, and basically he, how they say you force your way into playing. Well, he forced his way into the conversation. When I interview Matt LaFleur at halftime, normally the questions are, something Jordan Love related or this or that or whatever, but it was literally like, what do you have in Isaiah McDuffie? And you can tell that there's excitement there, that he's really getting it, in year 2. So we'll hear from them. We'll hear from Christian Watson, as we teased before, about just, is the opportunity kind of somewhat passing him by, at least for the time being, or how much catch up does he have? We'll hear from Rashawn Gary, as you mentioned, that one of those guys that everybody says could be the guy to emerge on the Green Bay Packers. And we'll also catch up with Mason Crosby in our special at 6 o'clock. Just kind of where he's at in the rehab process. He had 30 kicks the other day when I was up there on Tuesday. Seems very confident in his right leg, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of worries, but you do obviously want your veteran kicker to be ready week 1, especially in a game against the Minnesota Vikings, against a rival that could be a close game. So you want to be kind of reassured in that position if it comes down to a field goal kicking contest, that you've got your best guy back there. So that's what we'll have coming up at 5 and 6 for the special. And then obviously the Packers TV network pregame at 6:30 and the game at 7 o'clock.
Awesome. Well, we are looking forward to it. I will see you at 6, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys for watching here on TMJ4 Facebook and YouTube.